RocketMan crashes into NASA like the door was never locked. Harland Williams charges through astronaut training with the confidence of a man nobody remembered to stop. A pageant scream when Mars calls his name. William Sadler trying to keep the mission professional while everything around him turns ridiculous. A chimp in a spacesuit. A crew trapped with the wrong guy at the worst possible time. And one fart on another planet treated like a life or death mission failure. Behind the scenes, almost nothing about this rocket flew straight. The script came from two writers nobody expected to send anyone to Mars. The chimp on screen was real, but for one scene, the studio replaced it with a star nobody saw coming. And one tiny glitch sat there for decades before fans finally caught it. These are 10 weird facts about RocketMan, the Disney comedy that missed theaters and then became a childhood signal for everyone who found it later. The script came from Two Ad Guys. The Disney astronaut comedy of 1997 was not written by professional screenwriters. It was written by two roommates with day jobs in the advertising department. Craig Main was a copywriter at Walt Disney Studios, the kind of in-house job that involved selling other people's movies, not making them. He shared an apartment with his writing partner, Greg Herb. The two of them spent their off hours brainstorming what they thought might actually get made, and they landed on a pitch line that summed up their entire approach. What if Apollo 13 starred a goofball instead of Tom Hanks? Maine put it plainly. They had gone to see Apollo 13, loved it, and walked out thinking it would have been much more fun if Tom Hanks were just really dumb in the movie. The full concept followed quickly. A sci-fi comedy about a hyper-eccentric, totally unqualified geek who accidentally gets selected to go to Mars. They called it Space Cadet. To their total surprise, Disney did not hand the idea to seasoned writers. Disney and Caravan Pictures hired the two roommates to write the script themselves. The studio had a specific gap to fill, a family-friendly release slot that needed something fast, and they demanded a rapid turnaround. Maine and Herb drafted an entire studio screenplay under serious time pressure, pulling from their shared love of slapstick while figuring out how to structure a feature film for the very first time. After the completed draft was handed in, Disney executive Oren Aviv stepped in to adjust the script against the studio's strict brand guidelines. Then, he changed the title. Space Cadet fit the character perfectly, slang for someone completely spaced out, but the connotation worked against the marketing. It sounded small. Disney wanted something that played like a classic large-scale adventure, while keeping the tone light enough for kids. The marketing team secured the rights to Elton John's RocketMan, one of the most universally recognized pop songs ever written about space, and featured the track prominently over the closing credits. Rebranding the movie after a song every parent in America already knew gave the project instant name recognition. Space Cadet became RocketMan. Now Disney had to find the man to put inside it. Disney was hunting for the next Jim Carrey. In 1994, Harland Williams stole a single scene in Dumb and Dumber as the state trooper. That was it. One bit part. A few minutes of screen time. Disney could not stop watching him. Studios in the mid-1990s were aggressively hunting for the next Jim Carrey, a high-energy, hyper-physical comic who could carry a slapstick movie on his own face, and Williams' tiny appearance had given Disney enough to believe he might be that comic. The studio signed him to a multi-picture contract, which locked them into a specific obligation. They were now contractually required to find or build a movie for him to star in. Williams had gone from a stand-up scraping by in Los Angeles to a man Disney owed a starring role to. Two scripts came across his desk that year. RocketMan and George of the Jungle. Same studio, same year, same release slot. He could only do one. He chose RocketMan. George of the Jungle went to Brendan Fraser and became a hit. RocketMan flopped. The two movies opened months apart in 1997, and one rocketed Fraser into the next decade of his career, while the other quietly disappeared from theaters. Williams had chosen the wrong door on the same lot. He has said that George of the Jungle was one of the worst scripts he ever read, that there was just nothing there, and that RocketMan had a story with an arc, a real journey from A to B, and enormous room for comedy around the central idea of an idiot going into space. He has never expressed regret. Disney was so committed to letting him chase the comedy that they handed him something most lead actors never get: total creative control of the script. The studio let him rewrite the screenplay twice before filming started, reworking dialogue to fit his own vocal sound effects and improvisational style. The next Jim Carrey was now writing the lines he was going to deliver. The director had already survived Robin Williams. The man Disney chose to direct RocketMan had already spent years inside a comedy room with one of the most uncontrollable improvisers in television history. His name was Stuart Gillard. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, he had worked as a comedy writer in Los Angeles, and his biggest breakthrough came from Mork and Mindy, where he wrote for a young Robin Williams when Williams was still pure, untamed improvisational energy. The comedian who would walk into a scene and detonate the script within seconds. Anyone working with him had to learn fast how to keep a story upright while a lead actor rewrote it in real time. That experience was the real reason Disney hired Gillard. He was one of the very few directors in Hollywood with hands-on training in how to handle a manic hyper-improvisational comedian without letting everything collapse. RocketMan needed exactly that. Gillard had also just directed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 and could manage heavy special effects, physical stunts, and over-the-top comedy simultaneously. When Disney fast-tracked the movie into production and compressed the shoot to a brutal 9-week window, they needed someone who could move fast and hold the chaos together. When Harland Williams started throwing out the script on set, Gillard did not panic. He had already spent years managing exactly that kind of comedian. The best jokes were never on the page. Williams did not waste the creative control Disney had handed him. Two of the most recognizable scenes in the film came directly from him. The first was the announcement scene. In the original screenplay, NASA names Fred Z. Randall as the third crew member for the Mars mission, and Fred faints from shock. He passes out on the floor. Williams hated it. He pitched Gillard a completely different reaction, wanting to shriek, gasp, and cry with joy, exactly like a Miss America pageant winner being crowned in front of millions. Gillard let him try it. Williams nailed the ear-piercing, hysterical pageant scream in exactly one take, warning the sound crew beforehand to stand back because he was going to do the scream of all screams. The studio loved it so much that the moment became the centerpiece of the film's entire marketing campaign. The poster, the trailer, the TV spots, all built around a reaction the screenplay had never written. The fainting that was supposed to happen never happened. The pageant scream that replaced it became the most recognizable beat in the movie. The second change came in the isolation chamber scene. In the script, Fred sits inside the chamber, panics, and screams the word "mommy." That was the entire scene as written. Williams felt the setup was being wasted. He argued that an overactive imagination like Fred's would not just sit quietly in a room, but would unravel completely if locked inside one for 24 hours. So he took the scene into his own hands, pitching or ad-libbing almost every memorable element on set. The yodeling, the British sock puppet theater featuring Mr. and Mrs. Plumpton, the competing astronaut in the chamber beside him slowly losing his mind through the wall. What was written as one word became 15 punchlines and physical comedy bits. The 1967 film Disney never mentioned. 30 years before RocketMan, there was already a movie about a clumsy, unqualified nobody who stumbles into the space program and gets launched anyway. It came out in 1967. It starred Don Knotts, and Disney never mentioned it. The movie is called The Reluctant Astronaut, and the parallels are not small. Both films center on an anxious, clumsy underdog with no business going to space. The Reluctant Astronaut had Roy Fleming, an amusement park operator. RocketMan has Fred Z. Randall, a geeky computer programmer. Neither comes from the military or pilot pipeline real NASA missions actually run on. Both enter the space program entirely by accident, not through training or merit, but through a twist of fate the program never intended. Both films then lean on the exact same engine of slapstick training disasters, the unqualified hero breaking every NASA simulation built to weed him out, from centrifuges to water tanks, before getting launched anyway. RocketMan was not a new story. It was the same 1967 skeleton with the comedy cranked all the way up. The supporting cast looked too good for this movie for a broad Disney kids comedy. The supporting cast looked like it had wandered in from a different studio. Beau Bridges signed on as a veteran astronaut. By 1997, he was a multi-time Emmy winner and a Hollywood character actor with decades of credibility, the kind of performer who could lend gravity to almost anything. William Sadler came from Die Hard 2 and The Shawshank Redemption. Jeffrey Dean Morgan would later anchor The Walking Dead. Disney had stocked its slapstick with serious dramatic actors. The deepest cult name on the cast list belonged to Shelley Duvall, Wendy from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, the lead of Robert Altman's Popeye, one of the most recognizable faces of 1970s and 1980s American art cinema. She appeared as Harland Williams' mother, a casting choice nobody watching could have predicted from the marketing. The strategy was deliberate. If Disney had filled the supporting cast with broad sketch comedians, the film would have collapsed under its own silliness. Everyone shouting, everyone mugging, no anchor. By surrounding Williams with dramatic actors who refused to play the jokes, the production built a different chemistry entirely. Straight man versus manic clown. That refusal made Williams' antics twice as funny. The monkey was actually two performers. RocketMan's most important non-human character was a chimpanzee named Ulysses, and he was not played by what most viewers assume. Ulysses was performed by a 3-year-old female chimpanzee named Raven, and working with her required serious caution. Chimpanzees are incredibly strong and unpredictable even when trained, and every interaction with Raven on set was carefully choreographed before cameras rolled. There was one set of scenes she could not film, the exterior Mars sequences. Those shots required Ulysses to wear a full astronaut helmet, a sealed enclosed dome over the head. A real chimpanzee would have panicked the moment the seal closed, and no amount of training could safely override that instinct. The production needed another solution. The crew built a hyper-realistic chimp suit and hired an actor to wear it. That actor was Vern Troyer, 2 years before global fame arrived, before Austin Powers, before Mini-Me, before the cultural moment that would define the rest of his career. Troyer spent weeks on the RocketMan set as a chimpanzee body double, performing the stunts, filling out the wide spacesuit shots, and standing inside the sealed helmet Raven could not wear. The audience watched what looked like one performance. It was actually 2. A Mars glitch hidden in the famous fart scene. RocketMan's most quoted scene takes place on the surface of Mars and contains a continuity glitch almost nobody catches on first watch. Commander Overbeck suffers a critical leak in his spacesuit's primary oxygen tank, and Fred Randall improvises by connecting an emergency line from his own suit directly into Overbeck's helmet so they can share a single air supply back to the rover. Then Fred's stomach turns against him. Intense intestinal cramps inside a sealed suit connected directly to another man's helmet. He completely fills their shared oxygen system with flatulence. The film treats it like a medical emergency, with Overbeck's heart rate spiking and mission control registering dangerously high methane levels from the Mars surface. A man almost suffocates in a fart in a Disney movie on Mars. But hidden inside the moment is a small filmmaking mistake. Reflections from the studio lights bounced off the helmet glass during close-ups in a way the production could not control, so the filmmakers removed the face shields and planned to replace them digitally in post-production. The catch was the timing. This was 1997. CGI was still in early days for live-action features, and the budget could not cover a clean digital replacement of the helmet glass. The production just left it. If you watch the famous fart scene closely, both actors are visibly breathing on the surface of Mars with no face shields covering their helmets at all. A scene built around a man almost dying because of bad air, filmed with both men breathing the open air directly on Mars to flop in theaters, a staple on cable. Disney released RocketMan on October 10, 1997. It landed at number 6 at the weekend box office, and by its 4th weekend had slipped to number 11 and left the top 10 for good. The final domestic gross was around $15.4 million against an estimated $16 million budget, and that was before marketing costs. The reviews were brutal. Roger Ebert was nearly the only critic willing to defend it, calling it the kind of movie that gives you a goofy grin half the time, and crediting Williams with a knack of almost making you think he doesn't know how obnoxious his character is. Variety compared Williams unfavorably to Pauly Shore. USA Today called it one giant stumble for comedy kind. The film disappeared from theaters quickly. But shortly after the home video release, Disney began airing RocketMan on heavy rotation on the Disney Channel and Wonderful World of Disney. Through the late 1990s and into the early 2000s, it became weekend afternoon programming, the kind of movie that played constantly on cable when no one was paying full attention. A generation of kids grew up with it in the background, and that cable run quietly rewrote the film's legacy. Millions of millennials don't remember RocketMan as the 1997 disaster it was. They remember it as an accidental childhood staple. The film flopped in theaters and failed with critics, then found its audience anyway. Not in cinemas, but on the screens kids were watching while waiting for dinner. The title got swallowed by a bigger film type RocketMan into Google. The 1997 Disney comedy does not come up first. Disney had seen this coming and stylized the title on screen as RocketMan, one word, capital R, capital M in the middle, camel case, a specific visual choice designed to separate the movie from every other property using some version of the phrase. The distinction did not survive the internet. Search engines do not care about the difference between RocketMan, RocketMan, and RocketMan. Over time, the 1997 comedy ended up trapped between two much larger cultural objects. The first was the song. Elton John and Bernie Taupin's RocketMan had been released in 1972, one of the most beloved pop songs of the decade, and by the late 1990s, it had spent 25 years cementing itself in the cultural memory. The second was the biopic. In 2019, Paramount released RocketMan, the Elton John biographical film starring Taron Egerton, and it became the dominant search result for the title almost immediately. The Harland Williams comedy gets pushed down the page or buried completely. That makes the movie strangely hard to rediscover. It is not obscure because the title is unknown. It is obscure because the title is too famous for other things. And that is the strange final fate of the script written by two roommates from an ad department, a kids' comedy with a female chimp playing a male astronaut, and a cult Disney movie whose title got swallowed by a much bigger film 22 years later.